So I'm Jessica Reilly, and I have been on the school committee for about 3.5 years at this point. But on last Thursday, in our school committee meeting, we reassigned roles, and I took on the chairmanship role after having been vice chair for the last 2 years. So it's been an exciting time to take on chair. It's a little like drinking from a fire hose, but it's also really manageable. Anna Mae O'Shea Brooke, who was the chair before, has been very helpful in kind of supporting me transitioning. You know, honestly, the best part about reopening the schools is that we've been able to reopen the schools, that we have been able to get our children in the door, not as often as we'd like, and certainly not in the physical or the learning ways that we understand and know as school. But our kids are there, which allows us to form relationships with them face to face that hopefully will also allow them to anchor the remote learning that they do at home on the days that they're not able to be there. And that we're doing it in the best, safest way that we know how right now, because there have been so many uncertainties through this entire pandemic, and so many times where what we thought was the truth about pandemic and about risk, and then we see something contradictory the next time. The fact that we've been able to do that, get our kids in the door, get our teachers in the door, and get our teachers and kids working together through multiple modalities that have been, certainly difficult to think about in theory, but as we're doing it, we're realizing where our successes are and how this really kind of enhances what we understand about learning now. And it's 2 weeks in right now. And the first couple of weeks of school are always just a little kind of off kilter here and there. Everybody's getting to know each other. We haven't been in school for 6 months, which is something that in 50 years, if you ask your children where they were when they heard that there was not going to be any more school, they'll remember that, So I think that as a community, we're doing really well getting back in, even though there are bumps in the road, and that's to be expected in almost any year. But we're also doing the best to keep people safe, and that's the biggest priority for us. I have heard a lot of concerns in 2 areas, or essentially they boil down to 2 areas. One of which I think is the most important, which is in this time of change, of anxiety, of constant uncertainty, and let's face it, by September 2020, this is really starting to get old. And we're worried about our kids, maybe even more worried than we were in the spring. Personally, as a parent, I don't always know how my kid is going to react, to a new situation here, a new situation there. Families are really feeling this strain. There is nothing easy about not knowing exactly what the schedule is going to be, whether you're going to go to remote or you're going to be full inclusion, and what that's going to look like. It's putting a huge strain on families, and we understand that. So the first concern I would say that is overall is a concern that most school committees, most superintendents, most school districts across the state and across the country are hearing, which is, in the largest sense, can I trust you to do what you say you're going to do? Can I trust you to keep my kids safe, keep that which is most important to me safe, and also do what you say you can do, which is educate them, and not just educate them so that we're checking off boxes, but making sure that that is rich and that is to the standards that we want and that we need. And how are you going to do that? And we have a lot of great ideas and we're enacting them, but that basic feeling of uncertainty kind of permeates everything right now. And so I think we just have to keep on working, even if we make a mistake or if we have real triumph. We have to keep on just working to make sure that we're doing what we're trusted to do. And that is keeping our kids safe and educating them to the best of our ability, and also helping them catch up. Making sure that we're assessing where they are. The other concern that I hear is operational and completely understandable. In general, it's those little bumps that might happen any school year, the first couple of weeks, things like buses, where, every year people learn, new routes, and there's new bus drivers, or there's, kind of a difference here, and people are transitioning between schools. But this year, it's on a pandemic steroid level that is really difficult to correct quickly, but I think we're doing our best right now. And we've really gotten to the point where we have most kids off the wait list if they need busing. Our parents have been phenomenal in stepping up and saying, listen, okay, I understand that we can only fit 24 kids on a bus in order to be safe. So we will give up that portion of our day that it takes us to drop off our kids. And my personal gratitude around that is enormous. And I know that people in the administration, teachers, we all feel very strongly that we know that this is a sacrifice, and we appreciate it to be able to keep our kids safe. But it's not fun. It's not fun for anybody. Nobody wants to sit in traffic. And we are putting pieces into place around tracking and apps to know exactly where our kids are on our buses at all times and things like that. So kind of like operational tweaks that will help these issues, but they're not immediate. And we're working pretty hard on that. The other concern, it's going to be those things that like fall out of the sky. I did not wake up this morning to a windstorm and expect that at all. I just didn't. And so all of a sudden it's a Wednesday, which is the day that everybody's home, teachers, kids, and everybody's conversing to each other on Zoom all day. And there are pockets of neighborhoods that are out and pockets of neighborhoods that are fine, and people don't even know what you're talking about. And it's not enough to declare what we might begin to think of as a snow day, which is going to be like a power outage day. That's the new world of pandemic at this point. But that was a first-time experience for us too, because it's hard to anticipate some of these things all along. And especially if you're anticipating them and you're also not kind of getting some of the guidance and honestly the finances and the funding that we would get ostensibly from the state or somewhere else to be able to give us things like, in order to prevent issues around Wi-Fi, let's make sure every kid gets a dongle and a Wi-Fi hotspot, right? That's not going to happen here. We've outfitted everybody who needs technology and devices with technology and devices, and we made sure of that. But we're not going to be able to go up to that next level. And those are just going to be things that we will learn through this process, and I hope that we don't have to learn them for very long. So those are the challenges, the little things that happen every day that you're like, it's kind of like the rest of us. I wake up in the morning sometimes and I think, I wonder how incrementally more difficult this one small task I would ordinarily do that was pretty easy, just wonder how much more difficult that's going to be today. And I think that happens on a larger scale as well when you're in an institution. Across the board, our top priority is always safety. And I know that we should probably say that it's education, but I have to say that without safety, without being assured that you do not have to worry unnecessarily about the things around you, you do not have to worry unnecessarily about your health, that we are putting protocols into place to make sure that you are taken care of simply with your physical health, but also making the connections with you around how you are feeling. Are you learning? Are you open to learning? We know through brain science, through science in general, that kids cannot learn if they are worried. That our brain shuts down and it looks at the thing right in front of us, and it's very hard to open up to education. So as long as we are taking safety into account and being enormously serious about that, both for our kids and for our staff and for their families, then we can be assured that we have kids who are available for learning, which should ultimately be our top priority. And so we are constantly kind of working through protocols around the amount of work that we did on our HVAC systems, the amount of work that we have done, around kind of changing what the amount of even just fresh air exchange is within our buildings, which is now at 100%, when ordinarily it might be at like 20 or 25. Our heating bills will be enormous this year. That is nothing compared to the idea that we are keeping our kids safe and we're keeping them in school. That those things go hand in hand. So there's this kind of constant balance of, are we being safe and are we making connections, right? Are we keeping you emotionally safe too? Are we allowing you to feel competent at the thing that you're supposed to do, your job as a kid, which is to kind of go to school, right? Are we keeping you safe enough and building enough of a connection with you that you feel like you can do that? And that's also our biggest concern. They go hand in hand. So actually, pandemic management is not actually our job, and we never expected it to be our job. So we have a lot of other things on our plate. Much like the pandemic, sometimes fall out of the sky, and we have to embrace the gift of that. And sometimes things that we have seen coming down the road for a long time, but just take a lot of work. Obvious good example of the former, that this summer, which I believe you had Anna Mae O'Shea Brooke in to talk about, we voted as a school committee after listening to the community and listening to alumni and to various people within Native American communities, both local and national, and reviewing research. We realized that we could not be continuing on this journey as a school district exploring equity and diversity if we continued to embrace what was essentially dehumanized figure of a Native American and used it to represent our sports teams. There have been people who have talked about, is it an honor? And it is an honor, but the people who we say it represents have asked us not to give them that honor, and that's their privilege, and it's our privilege to learn why that might be. So there are a lot of other things happening within the district that might right now be the greatest kind of outward symbol of it, but that's been a focus of the district on internal conversations for a long time about how do we increase equity within our school community. How do we make sure that we are representing all voices, all people in our curriculum? Are there places that we're being a little mind blind, that we're not thinking from somebody else's perspective? And that doesn't devalue our perspective. It simply allows a lot more room for other people as well. And that's, I think, very important to us. And now with the opportunity to really explore what our new logo might be, and whether we continue to keep a warrior as the symbol of our values athletically and to represent our high school or our district, which is going to be a community conversation amongst students and staff and community members, and we're kind of in the process of brainstorming how that's going to go. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for kind of expansion and a lot of learning, and then the other thing, to kind of speak of long-term projects that we knew were coming down the road and been working on for a very long time, but of course reached a fever pitch at a period of time where everything else seems to have reached a fever pitch as well, is that we are in the kind of final stages of about to submit what we would call a preferred scenario to the Massachusetts School Building Authority for the new Dale Street School. And those decisions right now allow us to then more thoroughly explore and make sure that the things we are talking about are actually feasible to do in our town, right? So we do have to kind of make some decisions about how big the school is going to be, and the school committee voted to make that a 4-5 school. To some extent, because of the financial realities that the pandemic has brought upon us, and that the school building committee, which is a town committee, and the selectmen, when they presented to them, feel, I think, very strongly, but are not quite ready to vote yet. The school committee The school building committee did. But the selectmen decided to put it off for a little while until they got a little more public input to site the new school at the Wheelock campus. So, and I think the reasoning around that was because you could incorporate more resources within one campus, and fewer transitions for kids over a period of time. You have more flexibility if our populations decrease or increase. We do seem to have this kind of experience where the population of the district may not change, but you will get enormous classes all of a sudden, and then you have this huge cohort moving through. And to be able to have two schools in one space may actually give us a much larger ability to kind of manage those over the long term. But we'll be holding a public forum on that between the school committee and the school building committee and the selectmen on October 14th, and that will be via Zoom. It'll be at 6 p.m. and obviously we'll post it, and we would love if people would really come to us with their thoughts and feelings about what would be the best place, not the place that you don't want it, but what are your reasons around the best place for that to be. And there's a lot of information on the school website. There's a whole specific Dale Street Project page. And so those are the two really big things that we're doing, aside from reopening in a pandemic and just doing those things that are really important every day that would take all of our time. It's been a busy time. Some of it's been really great and engaging, and some of it has been a drag, really. So the best way for somebody to bring up their concerns to school committee unequivocally is absolutely not Facebook. I'm just going to put that out there right now, because it's really difficult for us to tell whether issues that are brought up on some of those community pages are actually issues that we can address in a constructive way. How many people are actually concerned about that? At what grade level? If you want to give feedback to the school committee about things like, staffing, administrative issues, concerns about how the curriculum could possibly be delivered, why we're doing hybrid, those kinds of very district-wide issues, please email us. You can email the entire school committee at the scchair@email.medfield.net. Or if you know that there is an instructional issue, something that's kind of on the ground, something that you are concerned about. I feel like my child isn't getting enough schoolwork for the second week of school. Is that a pandemic-related issue, or is that something that you really could have a rich conversation and an understanding of what's happening, and perhaps bring that to their attention for, okay, it's time that we start, kind of moving on a little bit. Bring that to your principal and bring that to your teachers, because they need to know that. If I disseminate it, or if our Reopening 2020 email disseminates it, then you're kind of hitting a middleman there that you won't be able to get as much change and as much effect as you may need. Some of this stuff can be pretty low-hanging fruit, and we don't have to suffer in silence, as our Dean of Students at Blake says so frequently, Kelly Campbell. Never suffer in silence. But if you're not gonna be silent, let's make sure you get to the right place, right? So really, truly, district-wide issues, please email us, or email Dr. Marston, or anybody within the kind of administrative level. But if you have things that are more local to school, please contact your school. They want to know who your kid is too, especially those years that you're transitioning in and you haven't been there before. They want to know that name. They want to know who you are. That's what we do. We form relationships with whole families. And then if you don't know where to put that concern, if you don't even know who to ask about the thing that you need to ask, there is an email address, the Reopening 2020 email.medfield.net, that is monitored consistently throughout the day, and you will receive an answer, or you will receive an answer from somebody who can answer your question if you put it into there, and that is monitored at central office pretty much all the time. That's really the best way to reach out to us. We do want to help in the best way that we can, and sometimes there are just things that we can't fix immediately, but we want to hear what it is so we can work with you around a solution.